is nice. Ooh, that is nice. Got me feeling all squirrely and squirmy, but like in a good way. Guys, this is going to be a fun conversation. You know that we like to give you good intel on not only what to read, but what to watch. This combines both of them, Jim. How great are we?
We actually are outstanding here because
We are.
we are a measure of the people we bring on the show, and in that measure, we are outstanding.
We're outstanding. We're only as good as our lowest common denominator, and our next guest is our highest common denominator. Today on Road Gang Radio, we are diving deep into the world of one of cinema's true visionaries, Martin Scorsese. Our guest is film critic and author Ian Nathan. He has just released Martin Scorsese, the iconic filmmaker, and his work. It is a stunning, Jim, I'm going to use the word stunning here. That word feels right here. Agreed?
Agreed.
Okay.
Right down to the cover artwork.
Yeah, dude. A stunning exploration of Scorsese's 5-decade journey from a Catholic kid in Manhattan to one of Hollywood's most celebrated storytellers, from Taxi Driver to Goodfellas to The Irishman. Dude, Martin Scorsese's films, they don't just entertain. They ask this is why I love it. They ask the big questions about, morality and power and what it means to be human, which is what I'm going to dive into with our guest today. So Ian Nathan, he's one of the UK's best-known film writers, former Empire editor. He breaks down all 26 of Scorsese's films and reveals what makes his storytelling so timeless. Please make welcome to the program, the great Ian Nathan. Good morning. Or good afternoon where you are.
Good morning. It's afternoon here, but it's morning with you.
Oh, okay, good.
I am going to say two words because I think, and I'd love you to kind of unpack this, Ian. Good morning, welcome. Mean streets, because it seems that no matter where Martin Scorsese is in his movies, the streets are always mean. And whether it is Jerusalem, whether it is actually New York, or whether it is New York of the 19th century, it doesn't matter where Martin Scorsese is. There's a meanness to the streets, but at the same time, like this cover that you have on this book, the streets are mean, but there is romance in the air, and I mean that with a capital R as opposed to just two people falling in love. Do you feel like that there is that sort of meanness that he kind of makes people wander through and then kind of draws moral conclusions based on how they react to those environments?
Oh, completely. I think everything he makes, as you say, from historical epics to contemporary films to gangster films, they all come back to his own childhood and his own view of the world. He grew up on Elizabeth Street in Little Italy and in Manhattan. He was very asthmatic as a child, so he couldn't go out very much. He couldn't join the other gangs and kids on the street. But he used to watch from a window and watch the whole of life pass by on these streets. And as you say, it was everything. It was romantic. It was New York, in the 50s and 40s. It was also gangsters, the crime. He would see it all from this frame of his window. And in a sense, all his films that he's made, since then, trying to interpret what that says about humanity.
I'm going to follow up with one quick thing and then toss this over back to Lindsay. There is also something about him in that he has something incredibly in common and nothing in common with Quentin Tarantino. Is I don't know, and maybe you. I was trying to think of it. Other than Tarantino, is there any filmmaker that is more encyclopedic, meaning that you could watch all of his movies and then, based on references, see the history of cinema in regards to a visual medium that he works his own morality through, that his understanding of cinema overall, whether it is popular culture stuff like Cecil B. DeMille's Ten Commandments or the films of Pier Paolo Pasolini, Scorsese knows them, and so that he doesn't even have to, like what I call pay homage, he can just literally reference it and put it out there. That window view was also directed towards the films of other people, that he literally inhales them and is spitting them back out onto the screen.
Oh, completely. I mean, the one place he could go as a child was the movies. And he grew up on the movies. He says they saved his life. In a sense, they gave him a life. And completely. I would say that there's probably no one alive. I like to think there's no one alive knows more, has seen more than Scorsese. Tarantino has probably a greater, terrific knowledge of exploitation film and a certain kind of 70s cinema. Scorsese knows it from the silent movies right through to contemporary film. His love of Powell and Pressburger, the great British filmmakers, who he's made a documentary about, that's filled, with colour that he then uses in his films. He loves the noirs of the 40s. He quotes, at will, You can probably tackle him on anything. If he was on the call with us now, you could throw any film title at him. He would have a take on it. He is a brilliant mastermind on the history of film, as much as he is a filmmaker. And I don't see those two things as separate. I think they're combined, as you were saying. And he invests everything he makes with that sense of potential of this medium. If you were to say one thing about Scorsese, is the man who's pushed this very new art form, in a sense, sort of only just over 100 years old, this thing called film. He has pursued its possibility. He has pursued it as an art form. One of his great frustrations as a creative person is this sense that people conceive of literature as greater than film. And he's always fought against that, within his films. That no, you can do so much with film. It's so important. It's so valuable. I think one of his great causes is film preservation. He is the mightiest living film brain there is.
The mightiest living film brain there is. What a bold statement. So since you mentioned, Tarantino, you've written definitive books on Spielberg, Tarantino, Tim Burton as well. And this time circling back to Scorsese, you call Scorsese the filmmaker who blends that raw emotion and intellectual depth. I'm so curious what that combination looks like to you, because it kind of sounds like what you're saying, but being that he is it's both historian and filmmaker, he's able to balance multiple worlds, it feels like, which also plays into both the emotion yet intellectual side of it. Is that right?
Oh, completely. He calls himself an anthropologist. He loves to study people. And I think, again, it goes back to growing up in New York and sort of witnessing people and part of that world. It's obviously an endless fascination to him, and he wants to bring film stories, film narratives close as possible to the idea of real life. So there's a documentarian element to him, and he does make documentaries as well. He wants to study people in a way that doesn't fit the old movie formulas, and he adores the old movie formulas, the great 40s films, but he won't see the world in good and bad. If you think of a film like Goodfellas, it's very much a portrayal of the life of gangsters, and that's the point. It's about the life, the lifestyle, how attractive it was to the young man, Henry Hill, the center of the story, how he's drawn in. Of course, Scorsese sort of saying to us, wouldn't you be drawn in? Wouldn't you want to live like this? Wouldn't you want to walk into a nightclub and, through the kitchen and arrive at the front of the stage and be the man? Surely you understand why he became this gangster. He doesn't see the world in simple terms, which makes his films very complex and often sort of quite challenging. Again, that's their quality. I love Wolf of Wall Street, about these sort of deplorable guys who sort of conned people out of money, basically, and lived a decadent life. What I love about it is Scorsese doesn't pass judgment. He leaves that up to us. We watch the film, laugh and love it, then start to go, hold on, these people are despicable. Shouldn't we not be laughing? That's the challenge of Scorsese.
I'm going to say this really quickly, Lindsay. Everybody who has seen Casino, everyone who has seen Wolf of Wall Street, everybody who has seen Goodfellas, I said that if he really succeeds at what he wants to do, you end up walking out thinking you had a great time and feeling absolutely dirty at the end that you did. And that's
balance. It's all balance.
It's all balance. I wanted to make this really quick point because you talked about film as an art form on the level of painting and making symphonies and all that. All I kept thinking about, and I thought about Spielberg as well too, if Spielberg is Rockwell, then Scorsese is Jackson Pollock, because I wanted to make a confession here. The way I got into Scorsese in the 80s was I'd seen other movies of his and enjoyed them and was told they were important. It was life lessons. It was the short film in an otherwise forgettable thing. I don't know if you've seen it, Lindsay. It's 3 films, Coppola, Woody Allen, and Scorsese. The other 2, Woody Allen is basically telling one long joke, and Coppola is in his worst element, which is the element of privilege. But then Scorsese shows up and makes this movie about a painter, and it was at that moment I realized, I said, I get what he's doing with the camera. He's actually engaged in action painting, the same thing that Jackson Pollock did, that he thinks in terms outside of just cinema. He says, how can cinema create the effect of an action painting? How can it create the effect of a jazz solo? I mean, is he thinking in those terms? And you can talk about that short movie where Nick Nolte is never better.
Yeah, I know. That's true. It's part of New York Stories, which is, as you say, a triple bill of great filmmakers on New York. Maybe not all of them at the top of their game, but I agree. The Scorsese one works the best. And I think there's an element of self-portrait in it. It's about the arrogance of the artist, the danger of the artist falling into self-regard when the younger woman is obviously the greater talent, and it's sort of a warning to himself. I think he is very interested in the limits of the medium. And, I mean, in the end, film is about telling stories and images, not words, images. And obviously words are very important to Scorsese films. It's all about imagery. So I think he is drawing close to that idea of, am I a painter? How do I use color to express things? And how did former filmmakers use it? What can I draw on? He is very happy to be a man who is inspired and references other films. He's not like Tarantino in that kind of very deliberate way that he's referencing, that kind of postmodern, better way of commentating on himself. Scorsese likes the transporting power of film still. He creates elegant tableaus. I love the first hour of Casino, where you're not sure the film's actually started yet, in story terms. He just moves into this sort of clinical documentary-like kind of way of examining Vegas, following the money through the casinos. And it's about the movement of the camera that follows the money. It's his kind of idea of creating shots is both radically inventive and inevitable. You think, there's no other way of shooting that. Go back to Goodfellas and the incredible tracking shot of Liotta and Lorraine Bracco moving into the nightclub. And for Scorsese, that was simply a way of representing the power and the glamour of becoming a gangster. And it was all seen through her eyes. It's about her eyes. She goes, as they go in, she's looking at it. She kind of suspects he's not really who he says he is, that he could be a gangster. And she's being drawn into the world too, that she's overcoming whatever moral quandary she might have, thinking, I want this life too. He uses the camera to sort of create emotional states of desire. And you look at Raging Bull, it's full of angst and pain. And then, The Ring is full of sort of release. Right across his work, camera work itself is a dialogue with the audience.
All right, so we know a lot about Jim. Jim and I both know a lot about you more than me, Jim, about Catholic guilt. But I want to talk about evolution.
I'm experiencing it right now. I mean,
I know. I want to talk about evolution, of his storytelling, what stayed constant as well. Because do you see his Scorsese's Catholic upbringing and those questions of guilt and redemption still shaping his later work? Or to what extent do you see it, rather? I know it does, but I guess to what extent was the evolution on it?
I think for sure. I mean, it is kind of a central theme. If you go back to the childhood, he was an altar boy at St. Patrick's in Lower Manhattan. He did contemplate becoming a priest. Seriously, he was thinking of taking it up. And it was film that sort of pulled him away in a different direction. He often talked about film as his religion. It was a religion that sort of found him. He describes himself as sort of a complicated agnostic. He sort of wrestles with his own faith. And that idea of Catholic guilt, it's not just I think anyone who is Catholic would understand the idea that it's not just a kind of choice to be religious. It's kind of a lifestyle thing that gets imbued into you. It's right back in, it's in Mean Streets, it's in Who's That Knocking at My Door, his very first film, the Harvey Keitel character. He's constantly looking at crosses and is afflicted by guilt. As you say, if you bring it right through to the kind of the most recent films, The Irishman is all about guilt. It's all about a man looking back at his own life and, sort of starting to realize the way that age you contemplate. As Scorsese is contemplating, the end of his life, you look at the things you've done and you think, what has this made of me? And that's very much The Irishman. It's sort of like a counterpoint to Goodfellas. Goodfellas is all about moving into the world. The Irishman is about coming out of the world. But it's all about accountability to ourselves, finally, if not to God. It's about us contesting these things and thinking, what has become of us? Killers of the Flower Moon, perhaps in a more general sense, is about the guilt of the white men, taking oil and taking land and stripping America. there's a kind of sense of, I think Scorsese's sort of marrying his own sense of guilt since being there in Taxi Driver, New York, and all those great films, especially in Raging Bull. I think he's now taking it and he's looking at it at a wider spectrum. He's looking at it in terms of the big story of America. If you want to categorize his later films, I think from Gangs of New York onwards, they're very much that he's doing a more historical, I'm telling the story of America style filmmaking. It's sort of still very personal, still very him. Now it's about what is America's guilt. And there is something of the Catholic very much in that.
By the way, Lindsay, take a look at what Trucker Boson has wrote. I'll let you kind of look at that before. There's another thing I want to kind of get to here. Lindsay, by the way, is a singer-songwriter over in Nashville and talks a lot about the way writing kind of helps act therapeutically towards moving people towards understanding themselves better. I was kind of curious, the documentary is about famous musicians, but I want to kind of go back to The Last Waltz for a second, because I just think one of the most spectacular moments in his entire filmmaking experience is Van Morrison's song moment in The Last Waltz, is that Scorsese is so good he actually finds the visual gag by cutting back to Robbie Robertson after the way Van Morrison exits the stage. It's a genuine punchline that he uses Robertson's reaction to Van Morrison's left. What continues to draw him back as a documentary filmmaker towards musical projects as well? What do you think really drives that?
I think music is so important to him. It's so important not just to him personally, but also to his methods. I mean, take any one of his films, and the music actually is more than just an accompaniment. The drama, it makes specific narrative points. It communicates very particular things. It's very much part of the ingredients. When he goes through scripts, this habit of writing songs beside the dialogue, saying this is, I'll use Rolling Stones here, I'll use Robbie Robertson here. He completely loves the idea of what music can do and the power it has. And it sort of falls back to that point about the art form of film. And I think a lot of filmmakers, Kubrick was very like this, they were very envious of what music could achieve emotionally that film takes far more effort to do. You have to do is hear a song, you feel something. Whereas film's got to get you to a place and make you understand that thing. And filmmakers are very interested in, I think they want to take film to the point of music, that kind of almost abstraction. We can take all the dialogue out or the story out. We're left with something that would make us feel the way that songs make us feel. I think that's what draws Scorsese back toward his documentary subjects, Stones, Bob Dylan, say that The Last Waltz with the band, and then Robbie Robertson. He was friends and he was part of that world. And one of his very early jobs was he was one of the team on the documentary Woodstock. He was shooting that and part of that thing. So he's always been there in his career. And I think he doesn't see the crossover. He's never called himself a documentary maker or a narrative filmmaker. He says they're the same thing. So it doesn't change despite the kind of mediums apparently changing. And as you say, The Last Waltz, one of the great things is he brings sort of narrative filmmaking tools to the idea of just shooting a concert. He won't let it be just a concert. He fills it with sort of dramatic ideas and dramatic energy that communicates the world around that and the personalities involved. People, at the heart of his films, what they're going through. And I think he is trying to explore what creativity is, where it comes from in us. That's about exploring himself. It's about exploring the things he loves. Why does Gimme Shelter by the Rolling Stones translate and communicate so much in his films? Why does he go back to that song? I don't think he knows exactly, but I think he's fascinated with that concept.
That's it. I love that we brought up the turn to music. Obviously, I think that's fascinating. But I always say, Ian, it's fascinating to me how whether it be a book, an author or a screenplay or a song, the difference in a song, we can write a song and tell a whole story in 3.5 minutes versus 3 hours or 300 pages. So it's a crazy arc. And I assume that I would love to sit down and have a conversation with the filmmaker about telling the story and when time is when it's, when you've got minutes or hours to do it. I think it's fascinating. So with all that being said, my random throw out question to you here, Ian, I don't know how well you know country music, but I guess we'd say music in general. But which Scorsese film to you would make the best country song? Film as a whole.
Oh, come on! There's only one, man. You got.
I know, but I want to see if he says it. Come on, and it doesn't have to be the obvious.
Yeah. No, there's a couple of them actually.
Yeah, I mean the one that springs to mind is, and it's a bit too obvious, is Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore, which is the Ellen Burstyn. She won an Academy Award for it, and she is a country singer. Yeah, it's not a very Scorsese film in terms of its setting. It's kind of middle America. It's about desire to be a singer. So that, I suppose, embodies some of what you're talking about. But I was to say, a film that could be a country song. Maybe I'm naive, but I kind of think of country songs as very kind of romantic, in a kind of widescreen way, in telling kind of complicated stories. Mm-hmm. I don't think of them as urban. I don't think of them as gangster very much. So, where would I go? Although having said that, I think there's elements of Gangs of New York in its kind of sense of the multiculturalism of America and the and it's all about revenge and it's about fathers and love. So that has elements of it. And here's a funny one for you: Bringing Out the Dead, which is a film. It's kind of a spiritual sister or brother film to Taxi Driver. It's about a lost soul. And I think, it's about a man trying to find his place again, that he's kind of shattered. And I think there's an element of that sadness in Bringing Out the Dead that could maybe translate itself to a country song. But I don't know. What do you think? Do you have one in mind?
Well, I mean, I was going to say Gangs in New York just for the sort of the aesthetic, the visual.
The
if I
rural
was making a
rock.
music video, yeah. If I was making a music video, I have not seen. Is it Bringing Out the Dead? Is that what you said?
Yes.
Called? But now I will probably be watching it tonight. Now that you just explained it, because I do agree with you, by the way, Ian, that I think country music is romantic, even if it is horribly depressing and makes you want to kill yourself. It's also it romanticizes life in general, and I mean for all of the emotions. So all three of your choices are cool for very different reasons, actually.
By the way, Ian, Lindsay, Bringing Out the Dead, has there ever, I got to tell you, my father and I saw that together in the movie theater, and when Ving Rhames brings that kid back to life is one of the most emotionally
uplifting. Did you just spoil something for me?
No, it's one little bit of an overall.
Okay.
The star is Nicolas Cage. It's his story. But there is a moment in there where I got to tell you, Lindsay, it's galvanizing in its fraudulence and in its absolute joy. Ian, we're out of time, man.
What?
We're
Guys,
out of time.
You got to go get this book, Martin Scorsese, the iconic filmmaker, and his work. You can find it wherever you buy your books, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, eBay, wherever you look, you search, you can
It's
find
a great
it as well.
gift.
And it is beautiful. Now, I don't physically have it, but I have seen it in your hands over there, Jimmy. I've gone through the PDF, but I've seen it with you in your hands. It is stunning. Ian, thank you for making the time for us today. And please come back you have several other works that we would love to dive into as well. So I